I'm going to call the city council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Counselor Weber. Here. Counselor Mo.
Here.
Counselor Rodley. Here. Counselor Blackwell. Here. Counselor Doyle. Here. And Counselor Fishneri.
Here. All right, we have one item for the work session, and I feel like we're going to hit the cycle of meetings tonight. So it's transportation sidewalk funding prioritization with Drew Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, councilors. As mentioned, we are going to be talking about sidewalk prioritization this evening. I prepared a few talking notes, but most of the information is in the council briefing memo, as well as a few attachments that I provided, including existing sidewalk network, sidewalk service requests. We have a sidewalk service request tool that you can go in online and say, my sidewalk's broken and upheaved, as well as a socioeconomic map. Without further ado, I'll just launch right into it. So as you're aware, there's a large backlog of sidewalk repair and maintenance needs throughout Springfield, as well as multiple missing sidewalk gaps. Back in 2022, May of last year, the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization, or the MPO, awarded the city of Springfield $1.34 million to address Springfield's sidewalk issues. The initial conversation in 2022 revolved around a sidewalk repair program. It would be like a 3 to 4 year program in which Ben Gibson, with me this evening, his operations department would kind of administer. However, staff recently learned that due to the nuances of the funding that was awarded, which is congestion mitigation and air quality money, that sidewalk repair program is unlikely to be approvable. This is due to the CMAQ funding must be, we must demonstrate that people have chosen to drive their vehicles as opposed to walking on the sidewalks due to its disrepair. While this may be achievable, yeah, I think it would take significant staff time, potentially taking away lots of dollars from the actual awarded money that we have. So therefore, staff explored an alternative approach to construct new sidewalks and complete missing gaps around schools, transit, and other services that currently prevent pedestrian travel. I did discuss this with the MPO, and they did agree that new sidewalks are absolutely approvable with the CMAQ funds that we have awarded currently. So tonight, staff is seeking 3 prioritizations to design and to deliver the sidewalk construction in Springfield. Staff prepared those 3 attachments showing the existing sidewalk system, the sidewalk citizen service requests, and socioeconomic maps. The first prioritization is whether to proceed with 1, the original intent and replace the existing sidewalks in our network, or 2, construct new sidewalk to fill the missing gaps, or 3, provide a combination of those 2 by rehabbing portions of the existing system and construct new sidewalks. The second prioritization is where in Springfield shall we focus our efforts? Where should we construct these sidewalks? Those are basically 1, historically excluded areas that you can see in the socioeconomic map attachment 4, I believe is what it was. Or 2, by prioritizing provided services such as schools, transit routes in and around commercial areas, downtown, those types of things. Or 3, focus on specific services, e.g. schools, or for example, schools or transit in those historically excluded areas. And then lastly, whether or not we want to have adjacent property owner participation. So thank you. Ben and I are here for questions you may have.
Before we open it up for questions, let's sort of back up. Could you just go over what CMAQ funding is? You know, where it comes from, how we prioritize it, just some of the basic facts.
So CMAQ funding, congestion mitigation and air quality, comes from the Federal Highway Administration Fund. So it comes from the feds. It's delivered to the state. The Oregon Department of Transportation administers it. And so that congestion mitigation and air quality funds must go to specific projects that, 1, either reduce congestion in and around our roadway systems, or 2, improve air quality. Like dust mitigation, like 28th Street dust mitigation would have been a good CMAQ candidate.
No, that's perfect. That helps. That helps a ton. Just getting people to see that when we talked about South 28th, right? That's where some of the money was coming from because of how the dust from an unpaved road really impacts the school. That's why we gotta use that money. All right, Corey?
I have lots of thoughts about this, but I will try to be brief. I love this project. It's probably no surprise that I'm just like, yes, let's do this. I like the combination of doing rehab and new sidewalks, is just to stretch it and do as much as we possibly can with this. And I appreciate the sort of overlay with the service requests and the socioeconomics. I think some of the other things, and y'all are probably thinking about it too, to just sort of, as we think about prioritizing, schools, yes, but also are there neighborhoods where there are like essential services for people who are seniors or people who are disabled or, you know, where most people walk to the grocery store? I mean, are there those neighborhoods where we would have an understanding where we would be able to really support that infrastructure in those sorts of places? So I would just say, could we layer some additional possible use or not use in as we consider the priorities? And I am for the sliding scale. I like the fact that maybe some people would be able to help pay for the sidewalks as opposed to it all being free, or just us saying 50% or whatever. I like the idea of like, could there be some negotiation of people like, I would happily pay for ADA ramps in this neighborhood.
Victoria?
So I'm curious, are you talking about potentially residential areas? Like, because my understanding has always been that sidewalks, even though they belong to the city, they're the responsibility of the property owner that lives in front of them. Is that not the case in Springfield?
No, the sidewalk maintenance and repair is per the Springfield Development Code, the responsibility of the
Okay.
adjacent property owner.
Okay, so what are you suggesting, that we're gonna do that in lieu of them, the property owners actually taking care of the sidewalks?
So there's kind of two different methods in which sidewalks are constructed. New development, so like when a subdivision, site plan, those types of things go in. And then at that point, that is the adjacent property owner's responsibility. The other way is if there are not existing sidewalks, is to what's it called again? I always forget what I call it, or what it's called, a local improvement district. Now, this is something that council could elect to do, is institute a local improvement district and go in and have that adjacent property owner pay for their fair share of the sidewalk. Ben might be able to answer a little bit more on the local improvement district. So with this funding, it's, you know, with sidewalk rehab reconstruction not really being an approvable, I mean, it could be. It could be a significant lift that, you know, staff goes out and demonstrates that, yes, people have chosen to not use the existing sidewalk network because it is broken and deteriorated. With this, I mean, with this funding, you have the option to try to incorporate local or adjacent property owner participation, either through a local improvement district, or if it's existing sidewalk, the responsibility is supposed to fall on the adjacent landowner.
But primarily what we're talking about is building new, so that we can fall under the requirements of this particular funds. That's what it sounds like.
I mean, that would be the easiest route with this money, is to go out and construct new sidewalk.
Thank you.
Other questions? Michelle?
I assume there's enough new sidewalk needs to use that funding in its entirety.
I believe so.
I'm
And
sure that's the case, but just if there's a way, to Corey's point, to incorporate some of this, like just I think about in my neighborhood alone, the number of sidewalks that are in some pretty decent disrepair and upheaved, and we, at the cost of our, you know, we replaced ours and two others on our street replaced theirs, but in that whole area, there are several that I just know they're never going to get repaired. You know, the property owners just aren't going to be able to do
I
it.
think that there's some areas where something like an LID would, where this could work, where we're infilling sidewalk. But there's others, I think, at Ward 5, I think somewhere in there, we have unimproved streets where we
Right
have
now.
roadside ditches and things like that.
Mhm.
It gets a little more tricky because now we're talking about, you know, our storm system and how are we going to manage that too. So me personally, I think that for infill, like to the magnitude of like an LID, we're looking at areas that already your curb and gutter.
Curb and gutter, yeah.
Right,
You
and so
that.
we're able to put sidewalks in there, because if we go beyond that, we jump into a whole new level.
Right.
Go.
So I'm support this. I like looking at it from two different approaches in regards to I guess. There's a fine line between repair and replacement. So I guess if you replace something, you've repaired it. But I like the idea of cost sharing and, sliding is fine. I mean, I think that, 25% straight across would be easier to deal with, but an LID I support. Just so it seems like we can spread the impact of the money much further throughout the city in regards to partial pay and the property owner partial pay. If it's a significant enough savings, I think a lot of property owners would jump in on it. I think especially if they realize how much liability they have if they don't. I think it's an education piece with the ability to do an LID and do some sidewalk replacement or even placement. So I think you got a big field in front of you, you can do a lot. And I think if you can present it to where you can get the biggest bang for the buck and still stay within the guidelines, I completely support it.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people don't realize that it's their responsibility and that they can be sued if somebody trips on their sidewalk. And so like I agree with Councilor Piscineri that, that education and then them knowing that they're going to be actually paying less than they would have if they, ended up with a liability.
So, yeah, and I think this is all good, good feedback. I think that one of the challenges that I see here is this is $1.5 million, both a lot and a little bit of money in the transportation world at the same time. And it would be very easy to sort of spread it all to the wind and create a lot of, administrative oversight, right? Like that, that we were required to do. So I would, my instinct is to sort of try to narrow it in some places so that we can get our arms around the administrative requirement, right? And actually sort of touch a neighborhood in a place where we can actually make a noticeable improvement in it. The other piece, question that I have, well, I guess the comment about the sliding scale, I'm open to that based on what the actual project plan looks like, right? There's neighborhoods in this community that I would be in favor of going out and talking to the neighborhood about taking some of the costs. There's neighborhoods that you just realistically, you look at the neighborhood and they're not gonna, they're just, if we don't do something, they're never ever gonna have sidewalks, right? And I think the other piece that is kind of critical here is the school list, right, is a really easy list because there's still, there's still a lot of places around schools that are missing a block and a half of sidewalk, right? Like, there's one next to Guy Lee, you cited one in the, in the list, on, I think it was Douglas Gardens that you had on your list. So there's a very easy place that you could get the community around, filling in additional sidewalk elements. Now, the other thing I want you to consider is, look, we've got the fall, like in the fall, we're gonna come back and talk about the street bond, right? And one of the questions that I keep coming back to that I hear in my end of town all the time is that probably 3 blocks, maybe, Michelle, between, on Second Street before it's T Street, where it's essentially like, that there's no sidewalks, that you've got a whole neighborhood that's sort of walking back down through the mud and like when we come to the street bond, I'm gonna like, that was one of the places that I consistently get asked, can we just fix that one place that touches all those homes? And there may be an opportunity to match that question with, with a little bit of sidewalks, because it would meet the definition of this program with, the conversation around, hey, can we actually get that road paved because you can lose a car in it? Right, so I'm open to this conversation taking a little bit more to kind of play out, but I think us, us knowing the bigger segments of the, what areas you're looking at would probably help a lot.
So one of the prioritizations is I was looking for direction from you on where to focus our effort.
Oh, okay. Schools, right?
Schools.
I've heard schools pretty consistently, right? Like, go.
Not enough UGB.
Not outside of city limits.
I think, somebody may have to keep me honest, if you live in Ward 5, like. Whatever that road is that's coming off of that Hayden Homes development, it's like South 51st Place. Right, all that traffic comes and it's an unimproved road, all the way up the. You know, all the way up to Main Street, and there's pedestrians on it all the time and park. What?
Daisy to Main Street.
Yeah. Second Street,
And I know this sounds extremely self-serving. If I didn't live there, I would still tell you, if that makes any sense. But I got a whole bunch of people that live on South 70. That entire street does not have a single section of sidewalk. All the way up to the top of the hill. It's storm sewer on both sides. And I apologize. I think there's like one block in there that may. But the rest is there's cars that have been lost in those ditches. And there's no sidewalks, and everybody on that entire street from Jesse Lane Park, which is a block away from it. All walk in the street, in the middle of the street, and all those young kids are walking literally in the street. And the street itself is probably, probably know where you probably don't, probably 17 feet, maybe wide,
It's not very wide.
Not very, it's narrow.
But you're talking about no curb and gutter?
nothing.
Yeah, but that's.
I understand. I'm
That's the
making a point.
developer's
So,
design.
so some of these like,
Point.
like South 51st, South 70, things like that, if we took a look at those, we would have to look at the storm.
Yeah.
The stormwater aspect of it as well.
I'm just trying to throw it back up in the wind, so. Knowing it's not exactly applicable to this.
So, prioritization decision that I'm looking for, are we replacing sidewalks? Are we going with that initial intent? Are we looking to do that, or are we looking to do new sidewalk filling existing gaps?
I would tell you, I heard sliding scale, right, like, so. Again, I'm worried about the administrative overhead, and then I'll let you guys jump in, right, like, so I would say probably maybe 75-25, right, like, if you can, you know, new, right, like to make it a little bit sort of easier, go ahead.
And yeah, and with the ones that need repair, where they're dangerous, then I would say absolutely look at them with an LID. So that way we can at least get to those, and the replacement or the new ones would be areas that don't have one. But if you have ones that are, knowing that the property owner is responsible for those sidewalks that need repair, that are a tripping hazard, or older folks can't even get past them. I would say, yeah, for sure do those, but look at them with an LID, paying for part of it out of that lump of money, but giving the opportunity to landowners to pay for their part too.
How was an LID formed? That is a little beyond me.
What's up, Jay? You're gonna be-
So LID can be formed by the council and initiated, or it can be formed per a petition by the property owner. So property owners can sign a petition, bringing it to the council, but ultimately it's the council's decision to form an LID.
Property owner investment is difficult.
Yeah, but I mean, going back, the council can do it without property owner. The council can decide to initiate an LID and assess property owner regardless of petition or no petition.
And that's why I think getting our kind of arms around what the potential project list is, we could probably rattle off $50 million of sidewalks that we needed. Right, so, okay, so you covered, are we doing prioritization versus, new build versus rehab? And I would tell you that if we can squeeze a little bit of, what I'm hearing is if we could squeeze a little bit of rehab into there, that's great. But again, understanding that you may look at that and go, hey, look, it's gonna take an act of Congress and, a dispensation from the Vatican to be able to get it done with these federal dollars, then we're okay kind of moving around a little bit. What else? Go ahead.
Okay, does this also include ADA ramps? So we've got a sidewalk, it's okay condition, but there's no ADA ramp. Is that included in
It could
this?
potentially be included. Cost of ADA ramps, like per intersection, is about $100,000 to do 4 ramps.
Okay,
12 intersections.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Okay.
it gets a little rough when you get into the ADA ramps. Now, we might encounter some situations where it's absolutely unavoidable and the ADA ramp has to be reconstructed. But the idea is to do sidewalks.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was curious. Thank you.
What other direction do you need? Go ahead.
So, yeah, the prioritization number one was new versus replace, and it sounds like we want to do a little bit of combination, mostly focusing on new rehab if we can. So the second one is essentially where in Springfield do we want to focus? There's that attachment 3 is the socioeconomic that shows 3, 4, anywhere from 1 to 4 socioeconomic hardships, which are, minority populations, elderly, disabled, and poverty. Now out there just east of Bob Straub is like a 4 factor. There's up just north of Q Street, between essentially Fifth and Mohawk that has 4. And then there's a number of 3-factor areas in town that these are all, have poverty, elderly, minority populations that live in them that might be financially burdened as it is. So we could focus our efforts on filling the gaps in those areas, or we could focus on some sort of service like in and around schools, around transit routes, around commercial areas, around parks. So it's kind of what council would wish us to focus our efforts on.
Corey?
So that's where I was gonna go when you jumped in about that, because I know that folks were talking about specific areas, but I was looking at the maps and thinking, for me, looking at those high level areas like in Gateway and Q Street, particularly like you think of how much affordable housing is being built around Q Street. And I know I'm one of the ones who's like, we're gonna eventually need to like develop the roads in that area too. So it would be, from my perspective, a priority to look at those areas that have those 3 and 4, factors in there if we're gonna start looking at and they're around schools and stuff too, but also like we're doing a lot of development in those areas, and there's gonna be a lot more people and better set funds.
Excuse me, Mayor,
Go ahead.
just wanted to interject, that also the city has the ADA transition plan that has some guidance about where sidewalks can go, and that could be integrated with this information also, to just to be consistent with that ADA plan and make sure that we are consistent with that and update that and start connected with one of the categories there that you were talking about.
Steve, we have very limited transit situation in Springfield, transit corridor. And we're gonna have to do this in such a way that we're gonna have to build that eventually. We're gonna have to build this in such a way that it suits the transit corridor. If people have a car, my buses bill, and but we had to be comfortable getting to that corridor. And very little of that here.
I think my preference would be stick with services, right? Stick with, because Q Street, like, Corey brings up a good point about the quality of Q Street, but it is, it is on a service line, so it would be in scope if we sort of started with services, right? Like, and if you think about what, the ability to make, to sort of impact the transportation system, we still have a ton of gaps that are within like a mile of schools or on school property, right? So we can kind of get, if we started by sort of focusing there, we're going to hit some of those areas anyway. That's going to get us, in the right direction and probably get us to a place where $1.5 million is a lot and a little bit of money at the same time, right? That we want people to feel the impact.
So I'm hearing services, schools, transit.
Yep.
Citywide.
I don't know how fast you can stretch $1.5 million, right? Like, so, yeah, so.
The expert, so you're out there looking, like, we're here to guide, but you really know where the need is. And I think that that's, part of our job as counselors is to trust you as staff to know where those areas are that have the most need. That's my feeling anyway. So
If you could make us a project list to look at, right, like we can cross off, things like the Douglas Garden one that was in the middle of this sounds like a great one. That 15 feet or whatever it is, they need a guide lead from a sidewalk perspective, sounds like a great one, right? And there's like every school's got that, that version of them.
So Safe Routes to School, actually, they keep an equities Excel sheet that ranks projects. And they have a number of sidewalk projects in and around town that we can pull from.
Yeah, so if we could do the next step of if we could develop some list of projects that meet with the direction that we gave you, and we can actually just look at it. We could just say, then we can give you some more clear direction than that.
And then, yeah, the third prioritization is whether or not we want adjacent property owner participation. Now, an LID can take up to a year, if not longer. Which will delay the federal funding, and we have a certain cycle that we have to spend the federal funding. Now, I'm not saying that we can't do it. It's just. It's a significant lift. If we want adjacent property owner participation.
Yeah, I remember when we did that LED. Septic tank, Cherokee, no.
There was one.
Cherokee, yeah. And that was a long, drawn out process that was a pain. But if there's any way, it just seems not necessarily LID, but something where we can come into simple agreements with property owners. Saying, okay, well, this is what's gonna run. Here's some information as far as if you don't get it fixed, it's very high liability. We're willing to pick up this much tab, whatever percentage is comfortable, and offer that to them. They don't take it, we move on to another sidewalk.
Yeah, because right now with the way the economy is, I would hate to think we were going to go in and tell people that we're gonna do this and we're gonna send you a bill. Like, even if it's 25%,
Yeah,
I
I'm
just
not
don't
saying
think, I mean,
it's the same.
people are under the weight of the costs of stuff right now so heavily that I think that would be something more.
Yeah,
down the
there's,
road.
there's a willingness on their part to chime in or to join into that's
Yeah,
different than saying we're doing it and we expect this from you too.
yeah, exactly.
So does that give you enough to start with? I mean, if you can get to an actual list, we'll be able to comment more specifically.
And do we want adjacent property owner participation for new sidewalk and repair, or just repair?
Yes.
Yes.
I think we're giving you a solid maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, as I think once you start with the safe routes to schools list, right? Start with the transit list and then see what comes out of that. And then, realistically, if it is gonna, if we look at it and it's just not gonna happen, right? There's no sense in, trying to force this thing here.
And all I know is that the more participation we get from property owners, the further out this money is gonna extend. So however we can make that happen.
On my street, we all would have been happy to participate at 25% as opposed to 100. So I think we need to, just ask the question, but there are definitely gonna be neighborhoods that are gonna say, we just can't swing that.
Yeah, extend that money a long way.
Okay. Great, yeah, we'll create a project list around schools and around transit routes, and we'll be back in the fall.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, I'm going to adjourn us. I think we're doing CETA next, or we're doing a special regular.
Special regulation.
Oh, special regular session. We're gonna move spots.
Official and regular.
I think that's.
I'm gonna call this special regular session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon,
Here.
Counselor Weber.
Here.
Counselor Mo.
Here.
Counselor Rodley,
Here.
Counselor Blackwell.
Here.
Counselor Doyle.
Here.
Counselor Pictionary.
Here, thank you. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we begin our meeting tonight, there is one designated time for public testimony this evening from from the audience. If you're attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located at the entrance of the city council chambers and give it to the city recorder. If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak either of those times, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. The order of public testimony is as follows: anyone in person in the council chambers, and then anyone that has raised their hand in Zoom. And Neil, how many people are joining us tonight?
We have 5 attendees online and approximately 16 in the council chambers.
All right, thank you. First item, please.
First item is the consent calendar.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Neil, could you call a vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber.
Yes.
Counselor Mo.
Yes.
Counselor Rodley.
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell.
Yes.
Counselor Doyle. And Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
You have no public hearings today, so the next item is business from the audience.
I don't have any cards here. Is there anybody that's raising their hand on Zoom?
No hands on Zoom.
All right, next item, please.
Any business from the city council?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that there was the training last week in City Hall was very well put together, and the PD did a great job. Your staff are amazing, Chief. And I think in the long run, it's going to be extremely well, I hope it's not very beneficial, but it may very well be very beneficial for city staff. So thank you for doing that. And I'm sure the staff really appreciates it.
Anybody else? All right, next item, please.
The next item is business from the city managers. Item 1 is grant applications for housing. There's 2 resolutions. Resolution number 2, a resolution in support of a grant application seeking planning assistance from the Department of Land Conservation and Development to assist with code requirements for housing in mixed use zoning districts. And resolution number 3, a resolution in support of a grant application seeking planning assistance from the Department of Land Conservation and Development to assist with community engagement to identify and address housing needs. And Sandy Belson is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm your comprehensive planning manager, and I realize this isn't specifically to build housing as you've had on your previous agendas. This is more about planning for housing and the regulations we have around what housing would be built. So as you heard, there are 2 resolutions in your packet tonight for your consideration to approve or not approve. These would, if you pass these, give direction to staff to go ahead and apply for grants to help fund the planning involved in addressing these state mandated requirements. So we are mandated to have clear and objective standards for housing. We did that as part of the development code update for all of our residential districts, but we have not yet done that for our mixed use zoning districts. And then we are also mandated to do a housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy. And then because we receive community development block grant funds and are part of the Home Consortium, we do a consolidated plan with Eugene. So those 3 efforts are going to require public outreach, and there's more specifics, particularly with the housing production strategy in terms of how we do that and who we engage. And so the second item here would be to help fund the community outreach to support those planning efforts. And these would be both applications would be submitted to the Department of Land Conservation and Development. They are due at the end of July. So that's what I can tell you. I can answer questions perhaps if you have any.
Are there any questions? All right, so the 2 questions I had jotted down were really with all the requirements that are coming down from the state. Could you give us a little bit of context as far as how much how much are we asking for? How much more do we need, right? Like some of these are big ticket items and I don't think in the packet I saw how much real money that we're asking for and if it meets all of the needs to meet all of the requirements from the state.
So I haven't put together a budget for the requests as of yet, let alone, I mean, I haven't even really done the work program part to be able to base the budget on it for these two requests. But more broadly, there is a lot of work, and I was corresponding today with staff from the Department of Land Conservation and Development about the whole climate-friendly equitable communities and specifically around the climate-friendly areas. And so they're like, how much are you going to need for that? And I'm like, I haven't completely wrapped my mind around that the climate-friendly area work would potentially intersect in both of these because climate-friendly areas are going to be mixed use by nature. And so our zoning districts are going to need to comply, but there may be other changes that we also need to do to, once we've identified those areas that need to be climate-friendly, what we need to do to meet the climate-friendly equitable communities rules for those. And then there's also the whole engagement aspect, the equitable communities part of that, and the displacement analysis that we have to do for climate-friendly areas that could tie into all of this. So it's a short answer. I mean, it's a long answer to say, I don't really have a good answer for you at this time, but there's a lot of work. We do have staff that is continued to be supported by the ARPA funds. So we do have 3 positions that would help us do some of this work. So so we are looking at consultants, but we'd like to also just do a lot of this ourselves. So this work would be paying for the consultant portion is what is in my mind, but that's not, like I said, I haven't done all that work to figure out the detail.
So when I think about these dollars coming in, right, like, one of the questions that I always, I'm started thinking about is really, we always want to position ourselves and so that we're getting money in to pay for Springfield staff to do this, opposed to having planning regulations, turn into, we have to hire a bunch of consultants to complete the work. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on that one. The other question that when I think about CFEX is bigger than a bread box. It's Titanic size. Is the housing production work and the housing capacity analysis work, is that bigger than a bread box as well? Like, this is a mountain of work, right?
So I'll try to answer both those questions or respond to both of those. So we don't have staff capacity to do all that's in front of us. And so that's why I'm looking at using this to pay for consultants, because we can't do it all ourselves. Our communication staff is already stretched. I mean, they really can't even provide the service that we need now. We get like half of a FTE for our division. So that's why I'm looking at probably needing consultant help on those outreach efforts, and also just to pay for some of the direct costs involved. And then on the code work, I mean, I don't think we have, that's why for the mixed use code work, I think it would be helpful to have a consultant to bring something to us. For the housing capacity analysis, we have a really great GIS team that has really shown how helpful they are through creating our comprehensive planning map. And they really love sinking their teeth into those planning questions and using the GIS to help. So I think we have capacity in-house to do the housing capacity analysis, which is your buildable lands analysis and your housing needs, and comparing those and seeing where we're coming up short. So I think we can do a lot of that in-house with the staff we have. Have I answered?
Yeah. Okay. And then I guess and maybe this is a fall conversation. I know you're working through the work plan and, and the question about how many FTEs we have. I really would love to, at some point, to come back and just kind of get our arms around like what's actually sort of coming up and the why and the how, and just get our sense of, what's the strategy to get through 3 or 4 like huge complex planning elements. Yeah, like I know that that's not for this item, but just sort of, I just want to flag that for the fall is to really talk about like how much work is actually in front of the planning staff right now. All right, I'm done. Joe.
I would like to make a motion to adopt resolution 2 and 3, or can we do these separately, Mary B?
Why you do them separately?
That's what I thought. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 2.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Absolutely.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
5 yeses, 1 absolutely, 0 no's. Motion passes.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 3.
Second.
Neil,
Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle.
Aye.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
motion passes 6 yeses, 0 no's. Next item.
Any other business from the city manager?
No further business.
Any business from the city attorney?
No business, thank you.
All right, I'm going to adjourn us. And then I believe, what time, Sita?
6:20.
All right, we are cruising right along. Good job, AJ. We are going back to the other room for Sita.
Nancy, on that